Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So tonight we got some interesting updates on the Roundhouse and stuff that's going on around in New Mexico. Our governor and her unjust mandate for civilian disarmament with Albuquerque is going to have its day in court. They haven't set the date that I have been able to find, but it's great that they're finally going to get their day in court to actually rule, or hopefully state their case that just how unjust this actually is, to segregate one entire section of New Mexico and basically initially try to get rid of the 2A rights, but then have to scale it back after pushback, even from our Attorney General here in New Mexico, who said he's not going to back her. Now, he's going to have to back her, I think, in these court cases because that's his job. But I think that it was enough of a pushback that she scaled it back. But she's, again, trying to get a job somewhere else. That's the only way you could put it this way. Maybe it's Sandy Hook promises. Maybe it's another political position. I could see our governor being vain enough to try to run for the presidency if it weren't for Biden. Who knows? Maybe she becomes VP when Biden bounces out and Newsom replaces him as the candidate. Because that's how I see that election going for 2024, is somehow Biden is so unpopular that he's going to bow out. Now, I've seen a lot of, just to get political for a little bit here, I've seen a lot of things recently from, one of my favorite guys is Peter Zeihan, because he talks about demographics and economics, and most of the stuff he says there's pretty dead on. But where I think he's dead wrong is where he's talking about the election in the United States. Biden is the least popular president we have ever had. You are seeing people in polls time and time again that even MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, there are a plethora of mass media sites, that legacy media sites is what I would call them actually, that have shown Trump is going to beat Biden by double digits in some polls. So I disagree with Zeihan, even though he says that the independents really do hate Trump and feel like they've been kicked out of the coalition. I honestly think that the economy has gotten so bad. The job situation hasn't seemed to get any better. Inflation has gotten so high, and Biden's going to take the fall for all of that. And I think that the candidate, whoever they replace him with, because he is so old, that I think he's going to find a way to bow out, or they're going to replace him. That's just my personal opinion. I see Newsom being that guy, and I could see our governor in New Mexico trying to be his VP, because it checks one of those boxes of having a female, and she's a diversity hire because she has some Hispanics in her. Quite literally, she's a little bit Hispanic. That's part of the reason why she became the governor of New Mexico, I believe. She's wildly underqualified for any political position, and we know this because we've lived in New Mexico, and we've lived under her rule, both as a senator and now as the governor. I can say that New Mexico is not better off with her in any way, shape, or form. Nor are we better with Martin Heinrich. I have some friends that have some very libertarian podcasts who liked Martin Heinrich for a while there, and I can tell you that they are absolutely wrong, because Heinrich is absolutely anti-freedom. He may have done some cool things for some veterans, but he is definitely not on board with freedom. So one of the cool things I saw, that a bill that's popping up in the Roundhouse, which is kind of interesting, is House Bill 58. House Bill 58 is a counter to the background checks, the universal background check stuff that was passed a couple sessions back. And what they're doing is, it looks like some Republican, and I'm saying Republican, someone from the right or someone from the libertarian spectrum, popped off and decided that we're going to try to pass this, or at least give it its day in the Roundhouse and see what if we can make smoke with it. And what it is a complete reversal of the universal background checks. They're trying to get rid of background checks for private sales. It looks like background checks, the way the language of the bill reads, period. if you have been a listener of New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, you know that I'm not a huge fan of background checks because they don't seem to be effective in any way, shape, or form. It's one of those stopgap measures that the NRA pushed to try to get people who are just exchanging property for property to try to help with the gun violence problem, the supposed gun violence problem. Thing is that we have a crime problem, and crime has gotten more violent over the years to some degree. What you see, though, in crime statistics is crime is going down, despite the legacy media propping up these mass robbings or mass lootings of stores. It's not as widely spread as it would appear to be. We are seeing more crime even in our little town here in New Mexico, in Farmington, New Mexico. But I think that has to do more with the economy downturn than it does with anything else. I've said that before on this podcast, that economics has more to do with everything in the world than we like to give it credit for. If people have jobs and are more prosperous, they tend to be less criminals. It's just kind of the statement of fact. More has come out about Wayne LaPierre's leaving from the NRA. It looks like there may or may not be a golden parachute to the tune of $17 million. For me, a person that has left the NRA a long time ago in its tracks, I was a lifetime member, and I got out of it when I got to seeing that they were the ones pushing for the bump stock ban, and they were the ones helping to push Trump towards that type of thing. Take the guns first, and we'll settle it later in court. That's why we're fighting all this stuff. Speaking of which, Cargill versus the state, basically the ATF, is going to be making it to the Supreme Court. Now, the Cargill case is a bump stock case. Now, most of us who don't have bump stocks and really don't care or didn't care, unless you started thinking about what that did. It laid the underpinnings for what we're fighting with the pistol braces and what we're fighting with the forced reset triggers. All the stuff that the left has been using was started by Trump. And what this case, the Cargill case, is actually doing in the Supreme Court, because it will be heard now, and it will be heard February 28th, so I'll keep you informed on what happens there, is it's going to be a Chevron deference case. So with the precedence that's happened with the Environmental Agency being ruled against, that they can't just arbitrarily make laws or rules without going through Congress, we have a very good possibility that the Supreme Court sides with us and ends the Chevron deference of the ATF, which means that they won't be able to make arbitrary rules like the pistol brace bullcrap that we're still fighting, unless you're under one of the injunctions by FPC or GOA. You're supposed to not have a pistol brace. That rule went into effect. If you have one, you are in effect by federal law. You are in possession of a short-barreled rifle. Now, most of the compliance rate is less than 6% of the 330 million gun users in the United States. Even if you took 40 million people, that is the estimate that it would have, which means it's in common use and should never have been a problem anyway. 6% compliance at 40 million people means that most of us decided to tell the ATF to kick rocks if we owned one of these. And that's actually what we need to be doing anyway. The ATF has long outlived its usefulness. I know that some law enforcement agencies still rely on the ATF to help them track guns that are used in crimes, and that helps save some resources, local resources. I think all that could be done by getting rid of the ATF and handing it over to the FBI, or giving those resources over to local law enforcement agencies in the state, because the ATF has proven time and time again that they're not on our side, and not on the American people's side is where I'm going with that. I think the ATF should be a convenience store. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms should all be a convenience. If you decide you want to partake, you should be able to partake without any repercussions because this is your rights. That's just my personal opinion. On the lighter side of things, it's been on multiple gun tuber channels right now that they've been looking at the 5.7 by 28 M1 Garand thumb was the one that started this trend. There's been several other places that have talked about it. LuckyGunner.com or Lucky Gunner's YouTube channel. They were talking about is the 5.7 by 28 basically an overglorified 22 Magnum, a more expensive 22 Magnum. And if you watch the videos of what M1 Garand showed, his M1 Garand thumb showed, was that it is still shot placement. It doesn't, out of a pistol specifically, it doesn't have the lethality that it would from something like a P90 with a 16-inch barrel. This is that Wunderwaffe cartridge that came out, and its history came out in the 90s, and the idea was that NATO needed a basically a modern M1 carbine for people that were behind enemy lines. What has actually happened is the 5.7 became a special operator's tool, a specialist tool more specifically, and there's been a lot of new guns like the Rock from Palmetto State Armory. Ruger has one out now. Smith & Wesson has one out now, as well as FN. Now, what is the big claim to fame with the 5.7? The big claim to fame is that you can carry 20 rounds. I would argue with today's modern cartridges and today's modern pistols, a Canik, for instance, this is one of the lower-end pistols. I say lower-end, lower-priced pistols, very high quality. You can get an 18-round 9mm round magazine in it, okay? For the same, roughly, actually it'd be a smaller gun than the 5.7. Remember, the 5.7 is a longer cartridge, so the gun frame itself, the grip itself, is going to be larger. And if you're not getting the knockdown or the overly glorified penetration, because you're not going to get the black tip arbor pierced rounds because they're not available in the United States to civilians. That's number one. Number two, lower recoil. Okay, so the big claim to fame, the second claim to fame with the 5.7 is that it's lower recoil in a pistol, but you have 20 rounds of carry. In the P90, which is what this was originally designed for, you could carry 50 rounds per magazine, that in a very tight, compact package. That's attractive until you realize that the cartridge doesn't actually do as much as a 5.56 would do. You know, a 5.56 in a normal AR-15, you have at least a 500-yard gun with a 10-inch rifle, or a 10-inch pistol, I should say. Let's be correct, 10.5-inch pistol. You still have a 200 or 300-yard pistol, okay? The P90 is lucky to make it to 200 yards at its best for its ballistic potential. That means that after that, you're not going to have enough energy. You're not going to have, it's going to start dropping, bleeding off its energy, and it's going to start dropping. Not to mention that the heaviest bullet that I know of for the 5.7 is only 40 grains. Now, that doesn't sound like that much of a difference between a 5.56 and the 5.7, but that makes a difference because of the cartridge capacity. The 5.56 is, instead of being 28 millimeters long, is 45 millimeters long, so it's almost double. Almost double the size of what the 5.7 by 28 is. That means that it can have a smaller projectile that is pushing a lot faster and will go a lot farther. That said, the heaviest round I know for the 5.56 is a 77 grain or a 79 grain, and I've seen 80 grain bullets for it too. So there is a lot more you can do with the 5.56 than you could with the 5.7, so there makes no sense to me to spend this exorbitant amount for the 5.7 rifle or the 5.7 pistol when you can pretty much do the same thing, get better results with a 9mm, and a 9mm is already in my rotation for carry guns. Now, I was very much in the camp of, should I get a 5.7? I was looking very heavily at the Rock, the PSA Rock, because of its price point, and because the 5.7 tickles a lot of those weird caliber things that I like. So I'm one of those weird guys that likes Wildcat calibers or different calibers because I don't like to be get the same shooting experience every time I go out. That's why I like the Russian 545, even though it's pretty much a 5.56. It's the Eastern version of the 5.56. What you notice with the 5.45 though is that it's got less recoil than the 5.56, which you would think, well, that's not really a big deal because the 5.56 doesn't have that much recoil anyway. But it makes a little bit of a difference, especially when you have someone like I do with my son, my youngest son, who's very recoil sensitive. Now he will shoot an AR-15 all day, but he actually prefers shooting the 5.45 over the 5.56 because that little bit of recoil he can still sense. For someone like me that grew up carrying or shooting 8mm Mausers and 30-06s, the 5.56 has nothing. I feel nothing when I shoot it. It jumps a little bit. That's what I think most American shooters feel with the 5.56. For someone who's just getting into shooting like my 16-year-old son, and he's not a little guy, he just has always been one of those guys that's been sound and noise are an issue with my youngest son. And they always have been since he's been a little guy. But when he shoots, he's more comfortable. And he can shoot any caliber. I mean, I've got him to shoot 30-06s, 270s, 12-gauge shotguns, and he shoots them. But he prefers going back to the lighter recoiling rifles. So there's nothing wrong with that. We each have our little thing. I still prefer the K98. I'm not going to lie. If that was the first rifle that was handed to me, the first rifle I hunted with, is a German K98 full military rifle. Meaning the long stock. It wasn't sporterized. It's what I feel the most comfortable with. And it's the one I usually do the best with, accuracy-wise. That surprises some people. That's probably not necessarily true nowadays with the training I've done. I do really well with my 308. Both of my PTRs. I do very well with my 5.56. But at distance, at like 300 yards or beyond, it always seems that I psychologically do better with my 8mm Mauser than I do with anything else. But when you have, almost 50 years of experience shooting the 8mm Mauser, so I got my 8mm Mauser when I was 8 years old. I'm 46 now. So when I add those extra years of experience, some of it's from reloading from my dad. Some of it is from just the experience I got with my dad. I'm one of the people that can actually load a K98, a standard K98 with a stripper clip just as fast as I could load an M1 and empty it just as fast as an M1. That's saying something, but that's also saying that the M1 only has 8 rounds where the K98 has 5 rounds. Okay, so I can manipulate the bolt and be almost as accurate as I could be with the M1 Garand and load another 5 rounds into it in the same time frame someone with an 8-shot magazine can do. 8-shot in-block clip could do with an M1 Garand. That said, I've had my dad's M1 Garand for a while now, and I've practiced and I've gotten a lot better with it, so maybe that's different too. But we always have that soft spot for our first rifle, and that's one of my first rifles. So where do I stand on the 5.7? I think it's pretty apparent. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great range toy. I don't see any practicality of it, but that's my personal opinion. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.